Behold the yellow duck. We looked on Craigslist for about a month before we found this hot rod. We were looking for something with a Granny Gear T18, something that already had lockers in it, something that had nice seats and a top, and a nice roll cage, and had already had a Chevy V8 swap in it. We looked at a whole bunch of basket case cj5s. Finally, we came across this thing. This was about 35 miles outside of town. We went and checked this thing out, and it was everything we were hoping it was. It had a little 305 in it that looked completely greasy and worn out. But this thing was punched 30 over. It had a comp dual energy cam in it, a 750 quadrajet, and it had an Edelbrock aluminum intake that was painted to look like a factory stock would. It made about 275 force. Now, that's not a huge impressive number, but in this tiny little Jeep, it flung this thing around. So after we checked this thing out for a minute, kicked the tires, and gave it a once around, we hopped in this thing and took it for a test drive.
So what do you think, Jan?
What's that tool for?
How do you like it so far, Dad? You like it? Think you can go to school in this?
Yeah, they...
Johnny. It's fun.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It's not leaking or anything.
This is as fast as it goes, right?
No, it goes really fast. But we won't go fast.
This is as fast as you can go.
Yeah, do you want me to go faster or stay at this speed?
Oh, is that too long?
No,
Should I floor it?
It's up to you, McPeanut.
What do you think of that?
That as fast as it goes?
No, it goes a lot faster than that.
But don't do that.
We won't go
We go
that
back
fast.
that way, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we need granny gear for this hill. This is too steep.
No way. That's funny.
I can pick whatever seat I want.
Dude, that is so low.
Oh, we can't ride.
That's two-wheel drive. He wanted $3,000 for this thing. We countered at $2,000. He came back with a counter punch at $2,400, and we jumped on it. We loaded it up on this rented U-Haul trailer and hauled it back home. So we got this thing home and started taking a closer look at it, and we had to do some ingenious repairs on this thing right away. It had a quadrajet 750 on this thing. Someone had JB welded the secondary shut. I cannot believe the fuel didn't eat through the JB weld and drop down into the valves and destroy the engine. On top of that, the accelerator pump mounting bracket was completely broke, which is a very common problem on these things. And yes, that's a sheet metal screw we put in there to sandwich the accelerator pump in place. Leaky valve stem, tire won't hold air? No problem. Just whip out the nearest tube of red RTV and boom, fixed. Spare tire too heavy for the tailgate? Oh, we can fix that. Just get yourself 4 body mounts, cut off a piece of your high lift jack, and an old leftover transfer case mount, bolt it all together, and boom. That tire is no longer too heavy for that tailgate. So what's the matter? Battery cables and winch cables hanging out all over the place about to melt into the exhaust? Well, just get you some zip ties, some wire loom, some electrical tape, and some random metal brackets that I have no idea where they came from. Bolt it right to the fender and start putting on them zip ties. And boom, bulletproof for off-road. That carbureted Chevy, too hard to start in the morning? We can fix that. Just cobble together this manual choke setup, put a screw in the end of it, And boom, you have manual choke, guaranteed to start even on the coldest mornings. Once we fixed all those little tiny random issues, it was time for mud test.
Look at my pants.
Was that horsepower?
Wait, hold on. Awesome! Was that awesome?
Yeah, I don't want. And look at it.
Wait.
It's all outside of my eye and in my hair.
Was that horse? Did you see
Whoa!
horsepower?
It's awesome!
I forgot to put it in four low.
Wait,
We're all four spinning.
I think so. I don't know.
Geo.
Then we had to test burnouts. Well, once we decided it could do burnouts, it was time to take it four-wheeling. We took this thing up Reddington Pass to the Chiva Falls Trail for a little bit of camping, and we beat on this thing on this trail. If you look carefully in the background,
So good at it.
you'll see a K5 Blazer stuck on a hill. These guys exploded the NP205 transfer case on that thing when they came crashing down on some rocks. I tried winching these guys out for an hour and I could not pull that big old heavy thing up the last hill of the trail.
It's only the body.
That was violent.
Only the body.
Oh, ow.
I just kissed.
Well, since we didn't break down or destroy the Jeep on the Chiva Falls camping trip, we decided, well, let's go play in the snow up at the Sutherland Trail in Catalina, Arizona. I was hoping there was going to be a little bit more snow, but there was definitely enough to play around in.
Snow Jeep, yeah. I'm protected by the car. Ah! Jan throws good now.
Then we had a huge stroke of bad luck. After a year straight of thrashing this thing every weekend on trails and drag racing it on the street, cylinders 6 and 8 totally gave up the rings one night when I was coming home from work. A year straight of constantly over-revving this little 305 in the mud, in the sand, on the street, I think was just a bit too excessive for them poor old cylinder rings. We took it to a local machine shop to get rebuilt, and for about $900 they went through the whole thing top to bottom. The crank didn't even need to be turned. We just polished that. The lifters for the cam were still brand new, so we reused the old lifters. There was very little wear on this little 305. The cross-hatching on the cylinder bores was still very visible. Really, it just needed to be honed and re-ringed, and that's about it. I got the motor home. We put the motor in the Jeep, and about 2 weeks later, I kid you not, I was pulling out of my driveway, and the engine literally just explodes when I'm basically just idling down the street. They refused to do any warranty work. They refused to help me at all. I had to sell the Jeep. That was my everyday driver to where I was teaching guitar at. So I had to sell the Jeep. I had to buy 2 Toyota 4-door cars for me and my wife. And we sold the thing for $2,000 with no motor in it, just the rolling chassis. A guy on Craigslist came and got it, loaded it up on the trailer, and that was that. Alright, we're back here with the goats. It's time to philosophize about what we did with this thing. So, what did we learn? Rule number 1. Never buy a hot-rodded old Jeep for $2,400 and make it your everyday driver. Take it off-road every weekend, thrash it, over-rev it, race it on the street, blast it in the wash and mud, and then blow the engine up so you can't get to work. That's rule number 1. What else did we learn? Let's see. Engines. When you're getting a replacement small block for your Jeep, don't go to a rinky-dink machine shop and have them do everything. You don't know what they're doing when you're not there. You don't know if they're using new rods. You don't know if they're machining everything. You just don't know. My philosophy, from what I've learned, get a good used engine. Throw some simple speed parts at it. A greasy used engine can still have a lot of life left in it. If you can find those all-stock truck motors, carbureted Chevy V8 truck motors, those things are built to take abuse and last a long time. You can get aluminum heads. There's good ones and bad ones, but there are some made in China aluminum heads that are really good. You can get some aluminum Vortec copies and the aluminum platform for only like $300 a side. So, say you get a crappy engine, a greasy used crappy Craigslist engine for $200-300, and then you get $600 worth of heads. That's only $900 into your engine, and you'll have plenty of power. Or if you could just find some good used cast iron heads that flow really well. Check all the casting numbers of old Chevy heads. Find out which ones have biggest size valves and the best flow rate and that are somewhat easy to find. Cheap, easy ways to make power on a used engine. This whole spending $1,000 on a rebuilt engine and having it blow up. Hell no. Then you gotta pull it out, take it back, prove it wasn't your fault. The other thing, we spent way too much on the yellow Jeep. Usually my budget for an old hopped up CJ is around $1,500 max. We went $1,000 over our usual budget on the yellow duck. So from now on, I'm going to try and keep it $1,500 or less. They're out there. Just keep looking at that price range. Something will pop up out of nowhere one day. Every person goes through different struggles in their life. Someone will have to sell their old hopped up Jeep for cheap, and you can jump on it. So we'll see you on the next episode of Junkyard Jeep. Don't be spending too much money on those rotting old Jeeps. Get yourself some old, worn out, small block motors and throw some cheap speed parts at them. Keep that budget under $1,500. This is Tiny Turkey signing off. Alright guys, so remember, old greasy engine, good. Cleaned up, freshly painted engine, bad. It probably means there's something wrong with it and the guy's trying to get it away by enticing you by making it look all minty fresh. Them old greasy engines, they're probably still running and still have a lot of life in them. Don't be afraid to go for the grease. Hit the subscribe button, like button, special thanks to Willie's Works, and we'll see you on the next episode of Junkyard Jeep. Take the race.